overcoming these obstacles is possible with robust political will, effective government governance, and the support of steadfast partners like the United States, one of CARICOM's key allies. This gathering wouldn't be possible without our esteemed program co-chairs, which are our invitees today, Ambassador Riyad Insanali, Ambassador Patrick Duddy, and Ambassador Fuller. We're lucky to have them. Ambassador Insanali is the former Guyana ambassador to the U.S. and OAS, and he chaired the Caribbean Communities Caucus. He holds degrees from Cambridge and Harvard. Ambassador Fuller is the permanent representative of Belize to the UN. He's ex-climate change liaison and chief meteorologist, and he holds an order to the British Empire for public service. I don't know if we should call you if it's like being a knight, but I think this is quite special. And Ambassador Duddy, who I've known for decades, I'm really excited to have you with us. He's retired U.S. diplomat, served as ambassador to Venezuela, was Deputy Assistant Secretary to Western Hemisphere, and now is a senior advisor at Duke. Obviously, none of this also couldn't occur without our able leader of this project, Alejandro Trenchi, who's our Global Americans Senior Research and Program Director. Excellent job, as you will see today. Their dedication and leadership are invaluable to our work, and I extend my heartfelt thanks to them and to our working group members for their contributions. I would also note my colleague and Vice President Robert Funk, who is also here and will probably contribute with his wonderful views and outtake of the region. Our agenda today is rich and engaging. Alejandro will kick things off by detailing the project and initiating a dialogue with our co-chairs, and should time allow, we'll then open the floor to your questions, which you can submit through the Q&A feature. So without further ado, I'm honored to pass the microphone to Alejandro. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carl, for the introduction. Well, as you mentioned, today marks the beginning of an ambitious journey for Global Americans, one that I'm privileged to manage. And well, this initiative seeks not only to broaden our insight into the intricate dynamics of the Caribbean, but also to fortify the bonds between the US and CARICOM. Well, as many of you already know, in the past 2 years, Global Americans has been at the forefront of rallying influential figures to collectively spotlight the challenges brought forth by climate change in the Caribbean. This concerted effort has been acknowledged by critical stakeholders from Capitol Hill to the White House and throughout Caribbean capitals, solidifying our position as leaders in regional analysis and advocacy for robust US-Caribbean relations. Our high-level working group on climate change in the Caribbean produced, in the past 2 years, 5 detailed reports addressing critical areas like the blue economy, climate finance, migration, and the impact of extreme weather events. This showcase our commitment to tackling these issues head-on. And now I extend my deepest appreciation to the high-level working group members for laying out the groundwork for our comprehensive Caribbean programming. Looking forward, we aim to publish 3 in-depth reports on key factors US-Caribbean relations alongside a report on Europe-CARICOM relations. This will explore issues such as deforestation, this is our first report, migration, criminality, and the challenge faced by vulnerable populations. Our commitment stands beyond report publications. We are also poised to elevate our findings through op-eds and the upcoming Caribbean Solution Summit in Washington, D.C., creating a vital platform for dialogue and collaborating among Caribbean diplomats, U.S. policymakers, and international stakeholders. I'm also thrilled to announce, the establishment of the high-level working group on US-CARICOM relations, and today we have the honor to have our 3 co-chairs, Ambassador Riyad Insanali, Ambassador Patrick Duddy, and Ambassador Carlos Fuller. Thank you very much for accepting this position. Well, this group comprises a diverse mix of diplomats, academics, business leaders, and civil society members that will play a pivotal role in fostering a rich dialogue across the Caribbean, European, and American landscapes. As we kickstart this series of strategic dialogues and anticipate the release of our first report on Caribbean forestry next Tuesday, our goal is clear: to deepen the global community's understanding of the Caribbean, advocate for meaningful policy solutions, and strengthen the resilience and relationship within the U.S. CARICOM sphere. And well, today's sessions underscores this commitment to confronting the challenges and seizing the opportunities that lie ahead for the Caribbean region. Well, again, thank you very much for embarking on this vital journey for us. Well, now we are going to open to our co-chairs for some initial remarks. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ale. Why don't we start with Ambassador Fuller? Why don't you give us sort of an opening, and then I think if we can frame this conversation a little bit, and all of you have incredible experience here, I want to give you an opportunity to just define things as you see them at this point with the relationship with CARICOM, and then we'll take it from there. So Ambassador Fuller, why don't we start with you, then we'll go with Ambassador Nsanali and wrap up with Ambassador Duddy.
Thank you very much, Carl. First of all, let me say thank you very much for the invitation to join the group. In fact, I found my experiences over the past 2 years working with you on the issues of climate change and producing those reports very enriching. And in fact, so I look forward to indeed engaging at a broader issue as how we discuss the CARICOM-US relations. As an opening, I would say CARICOM-US relations have been rather steady. Traditionally, it used to focus primarily on security issues, especially for the US. And so the support between the relationship between CARICOM and the US was really evolved around that security concern, drug trafficking, various other security threats in the region. However, as the international focus has now shifted towards environmental issues, the relationship has also now included that issue, climate change, biodiversity, and oceans. So I think our future relations are really going to be addressed around that, because those also have security implications. So I think our framing is really going to revolve around those issues and really the importance of working together to address those issues, because these cross borders seamlessly. And so that's an area indeed we have to address.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Nsanali.
Thanks, Carl, and thanks, Alejandro, for your opening remarks as well. I'd just like to say that I'm greatly honored to be a part of this group as an honorary co-chair. I'd like to congratulate the Global Americans team on all the work it's put into developing this report, and of course, there's more to come, I know. I think US-Caribbean relations are particularly strong at this time, and I know that you've got some specific questions for all of us, Carl, and I'd go into that with a bit more depth when I have the opportunity. But not to take too much time, because I know we want to have a focused discussion. Just let me say that I'm delighted to be here and look forward to a very robust interactive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ambassador Duddy, I would just note, when you and I met and worked, I was on the Foreign Relations Committee, and you were in state when the many amazing jobs you did there. I remember the conversations generally, and I think things have probably changed a bit, at least on the Hill. CARICOM became important and interesting only one time a year, which was during the election of the OAS head. That has changed. I can tell from our conversations and feedback here. I would love to hear your impressions of what has really changed there as you frame this.
Well, good morning, all, and thank you for including me, Carl, Alejandro, and the rest of the team at Global Americans. I think you're doing a terrific job. I would begin by noting that we have seen in the last year and a half or so visits to the sub-region by senior American officials at an almost unprecedented rate. And Carl, to your question, I think this argues a renewed and conceivably deeper interest and appreciation for what the Caribbean represents for the United States. We have seen Vice President Harris traveling to the region to announce new initiatives, but also, and as recently as February, Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield traveling to Guyana to talk about other issues. Recently, both Assistant Secretary Brian Nichols, with whom you will recall, you and I worked 20 years ago when he was Director of Caribbean Affairs, but Assistant Secretary Nichols and Secretary of State Blinken traveled to Jamaica recently to meet with senior CARICOM leaders to discuss the crisis in Haiti. This level of engagement by people at the cabinet level, and when one contemplates the vice president's engagement at the level of the White House, it seems to me is something we should emphasize. This is really quite extraordinary, particularly in the context of all of the challenges which the international community is facing today, whether we're speaking of Ukraine or the Middle East or the 5 coups in sub-Saharan Africa, the droughts in several very sensitive regions of the world. Nevertheless, at the risk of using an informal phrase, the first team has been traveling to the Caribbean to engage. And I think that's incredibly important. So I'll just leave it there, and I'm happy to address any number of particular issues.
Yep. No, as things have changed, and we hope to highlight that in this session. Before we go to Ale, I don't know if my colleague Robert has any opening or would like to pursue any of the issues that we've highlighted.
Well, thank you, Carl, and thank you, ambassadors. I think one of the things that comes to mind, and I think all 3 ambassadors talked about it or touched on it in some sort of way, is I think a really interesting point, and also it comes out in the report, which is coming out this week on the environmental impact in the Caribbean, is the relationship with security. And I think this ties into it. I think it's so topical because it ties into what's happening in Haiti. So, I think in the report, we talk about the fact that, that use of resources, as resources become more scarce because of climate change, chopping down forests and so on, leads to social instability. And certainly that's part of the thing that we're seeing in Haiti. We talked just before going online about how climate change is affecting the Panama Canal and the impact that can have not only on trade, but also security. So I wonder I think maybe that's a really good place to start. It links into our report, and I think it's on everybody's mind, given what's going on in Haiti right now.
Thanks, Robert. Thank you. Ale, the floor is yours.
Yeah.
Let's kick it off.
Well, thank you, Carl Robert. Ambassador Daddy was mentioning the shift that U.S. Caribbean relations witness through the U.S. perspective, and Ambassador Fuller was mentioning different topics, and I wanted to ask Ambassador Insanali how he would characterize U.S. CARICOM relations, from the Caribbean perspective.
Well, based on what Ambassador Duddy said, in fact, he anticipated quite a few of the comments I was going to make, but I can only agree that the relationship is particularly strong at the moment. We've had a number of high-level visits, as Ambassador Duddy pointed out, the Vice President herself, Secretary Blinken, Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield. I was going to single out the 2 visits by Secretary of State Blinken to the CARICOM annual summit in Trinidad in July last year, and in particular, Ambassador Thomas Greenfield's visit to the CARICOM intersessional meeting in Guyana in February this year, as very significant steps in strengthening the U.S. CARICOM relationship. In the latter engagement, that is the participation of Ambassador Thomas Greenfield in the CARICOM intersessional meeting, there was, well, apart from the very frank discussion on Haiti and related security issues, she announced funding to address climate and biodiversity threats in the Caribbean. And this funding comes under the U.S. aid umbrella, and it includes $15.8 million in previously unannounced funding, bringing the total funding to, I think, something like $43 million. This is not insignificant. There's always a sense that more is needed, but I think given capacity constraints and the region's own ability to implement projects, it is not an unreasonable situation. And in fact, it should be viewed quite positively. It is a significant part of, I believe, the US's ongoing commitment to strengthening the partnership with the Caribbean and with CARICOM specifically. And in this case, of course, to facilitate climate adaptation and resilience. And it is all, of course, in keeping with the objectives of PAC 2030, the U.S. Caribbean Partnership to address the climate crisis. Both high-level visits demonstrate, I believe, an awareness of the need to compete with external countries for influence in the region. I don't think the Biden-Harris administration can be accused in any way of taking the region for granted, which has been an issue in the past. And in fact, it should be encouraged to do more to support the energy transition, energy security, food security, in addition to helping with climate adaptation and resilience. But beyond all this, beyond this specific focus on climate change and adaptation, you have the region's security interests as a whole at stake. And the point, of course, is that security in the Caribbean directly affects U.S. security. And that is a key point in the convergence of interests that will continue to exercise the minds of leaders in both the United States and CARICOM.
Thank you, Ambassador Insanali. Well, the security aspect nowadays is crucial because of the situation in Haiti. And well, Ambassador Daddy, you had experience working with Haiti, and I wanted to ask you your perspective on how Haiti is playing a role in U.S. CARICOM relations in the past and today, and what's your take?
Well, let me begin by noting, as we're also announced the proximate publication of the new report, that when we talk about Haiti, we're talking about the least forested country in the Caribbean basin, a country which is always on the verge of or immersed in dealing with serious environmental issues which, among other things, affect food supply. Now, essentially, since the assassination of the president of Haiti now a couple of years ago, we've seen the interim authorities request assistance, international assistance. The U.S. endorsed that request. Ultimately, the United Nations did as well. And essentially, since 2022, the U.S. has been canvassing international players to see which countries might be willing to contribute to a multinational security support mission in Haiti. This would not be a formal peacekeeping operation, but would be authorized, has been authorized by the United Nations. There are now a number of nations which have announced that they are ready to dispatch forces. Kenya, many of us are aware, has promised 1,000 police, but the Bahamas, Barbados, Bangladesh, Benin, Jamaica, Antigua and Barbuda have all also indicated, sometimes with great specificity, sometimes less so, a willingness to participate in a support mission. And the U.S. has also committed to date a total of about $300 million in either cash or in-kind resources to assist the mission. What I would note in the context of this morning's discussion is the degree to which, unfortunately, even leaving aside considerations of capacity, absorptive capacity in other countries, a crisis such as we have seen in Haiti essentially absorbs a huge amount of what might otherwise be available to assist with the economic and development of the region and its ongoing struggle to engage effectively on the issue of climate change. It seems to me we are in a positive moment with respect to Haiti, but we need to acknowledge that no forces have yet been deployed. There is now a nearly complete transitional presidential council, and said presidential council will eventually elect a council president and an interim prime minister, and they hope to be able to make early some kind of a dent in the current situation, one in which 80% of the capital city is controlled by gangs. That's going to be necessary in order to relieve the suffering and to permit an international force to deploy. This is always highly controversial in Haiti. Haiti has good reason for being skeptical of international interventions. I think all of us who care about the island, its population, and the possible impact that turmoil there could have on the subregion and on the U.S. Are sensitive to those concerns. But I note that there does seem to be something approaching consensus that a robust international mission is going to be necessary to restore order. And the U.S. has been heretofore very supportive of that effort.
Thank you, Ambassador Patrick. And before moving to more the environmental agenda of the U.S. CARICOM relation, I wanted to see if Ambassador Insanali, Ambassador Fuller wanted to mention something on the situation in Haiti in relation to U.S. CARICOM relations.
Hi, Alejandro. Thanks very much. I'd just like to build on what Ambassador Dodge just spoke about. I think we have learned from the two mistakes, in my opinion, that has occurred already, that occurred in the past with interventions with Haiti. First of all, the World Bank, I think, has invested over the past 30, 40 years, hundreds of millions of dollars in reforestation in Haiti. And in fact, they were addressing the issue of forestry, but the big issue was the lack of energy. If we had addressed the energy issue, then we would not have had the issue with forestry. So that, first of all, I think we have to recognize there's an energy problem for Haiti, and we have to provide energy to them. And that will then, I think the forest issue will then resolve itself much easier. Secondly, I think the U.S. has learned that they cannot go in alone. They have to build a team and get CARICOM, the friends around Haiti, to work with the U.S. To assist Haiti in this reconstruction that now has to occur, addressing the gang issue and so on. So I think that is now working well, getting the eminent persons involved, the former prime ministers of the Caribbean to work together, getting CARICOM to work with them. I know there's a training facility in Jamaica that is about to be completed, where all the troops will actually assemble and train together. So when we do go into Haiti to assist the national police, it is a well-coordinated effort. So I think that is going to be very much in assistance. And I think the logistical support that the U.S. is going to provide to enable that to happen is going to be extremely important. Thanks.
You know, let me just butt in a little bit, Ale, because I think Ambassador Fuller said something that's super important, and I just want him to drill down a little bit on it. because we've seen ourselves in this situation so many times, Ambassador, in Haiti, and it just seems that we have an opportunity, I think, as Ambassador Duddy mentioned, that things are positive in respect to the fact that there's a willingness and an acknowledgement of what's happening there now. But you've touched on a really key point, which is the root causes or the root issues that make up a solution, right? And you talked about energy, and I think that's a key variable. What other root causes should we address in the United States when we look at this and we look at it on the news hour or we look at it in the media? It's all about security, but security is more a result of the root problems that are happening on the island. What other items do you believe in? And this is not just a question to you, Ambassador Fuller, also to Ambassador Insanali and Ambassador Duddy. What other root causes should the U.S. government, CARICOM, be focused on as they address this round in Haiti?
Well, certainly, beside the issue of energy, the entire agricultural system needs strengthening. Obviously, they have the inert capacity for it, but we now need to get them to be self-sufficient. They have huge manpower. They have an extremely well-trained personnel in Haiti. Many have, unfortunately, who have left. But we need to get them to go back home, indeed, to use their intellectual capacity and to use the connections they now have with the U.S. and around the world to build the national capacity within Haiti in that regard, in agriculture, in transportation, in allowing them to export what they'll be able to produce domestically. So I think there's a lot that can be working there. And I think improving Haiti-Dominican Republic relationships is also going to be an important aspect also to build upon.
Yeah. Carl, if I may just add to that. First of all, Ambassador Fuller is exactly right that energy is and should be going forward a fundamental concern. But food security is important too, and that is related to sustainable agriculture. And the sustainability of agricultural practice will have a lot to do with preservation of the little that remains of Haiti's original forest cover. What I note is the U.S. government has been working to support the sustainable agriculture, and also through the McGovern-Dole International Food Program to provide meals to school-aged children. These are needs that I think have to be addressed simultaneously. We cannot and should not concentrate on security matters to the exclusion of these other humanitarian concerns. And then, if I may, I'll touch on one other point, and that is the current turmoil has largely forced the very significant international medical community that was working in Haiti to at least temporarily leave the island. And I think the restoration of a modicum of order and with the rule of law will be necessary to bring those people back. There is some infrastructure there, but it of course suffers if it is not being used. So there are medical considerations, food considerations, sustainable agriculture, and energy is fundamental to many of those issues, including, for instance, keeping the lights on at the hospitals.
Yeah, and I can't let that moment pass, Ambassador Duddy, without sort of referencing the great work of Paul Farmer, who's not with us anymore, but what a contribution he made. But I don't want to interrupt Ambassador Insanali and the points that he may have as well. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Carl. I was hoping you would bypass me since I'm not an expert on Haiti at all. And I find the complexity of the Haitian situation too overwhelming, actually, to try and offer any sort of rational suggestions. It's a mess. And I say that with the greatest of respect for my Haitian friends and the Haitian people. But we have to bear in mind that notwithstanding the good faith efforts of CARICOM, United States, the international community as a whole, Haitians themselves are deeply skeptical of the international community. They're always fearful of an externally imposed solution to their problems. They themselves have their own challenges in forming any sort of consensus. And of course, you've got the gangs running rampant in the country. It would be presumptuous of me to try and offer solutions since I'm not an expert. And I think we can only hope that good sense will prevail in these sort of baby steps that are being taken towards trying to find a solution and trying to bring the stakeholders in Haiti together to do so with support, but having them that find a way to, there's been talk about whether you negotiate with the gangs. Well, it's not for me to say. I'm not a Haitian, but I don't view the gangs as freedom fighters.
If I may, you're exactly right. And I think that what you're essentially saying is we need to find a way to be confident that Haitians take ownership of whatever solution we all collectively embrace.
Thank you, Patrick. That was more elegantly put than I could have done. But I don't want this discussion to focus on Haiti alone.
Exactly. I want to get to you.
U.S.-Caribbean relations in a broader sense. And
yes, no, and Ambassador Sanali, I wanted to pick your brain on Guyana, to be completely honest with you. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how Guyana benefits from its forests and what is the importance for the country's development strategy, what this issue of conservation. And I've been to Guyana, and it is very, very green. And I just want to get us, I mean, all we're hearing about Guyana right now is about oil. And how it is a country that has the biggest oil boom that we've ever seen. And the focus has been on that. Obviously, the focus also has been on its relationship with its neighbor, Venezuela. But I would love to hear your perspectives, your views on this more side that has to do with the preservation or with the conservation or with the issues having to do with forestry in Guyana and how you see that playing out.
Thanks again, Carl. Well, I think I don't know if it's a well-known fact, but at least in Guyana, the government is very keen to emphasize the fact that we have the world's second highest level of forest cover. That's some 85% of the country's land mass. And it has been estimated, I understand, that our forests hold carbon in unusually high density, storing some 5.3 gigatons of carbon. That is huge. That is huge by any measure. And this is highly important in the context of the country's development strategy, which right now is, of course, underpinned by the vast oil and gas discoveries offshore. Some see a contradiction in Guyana's own commitment to a low carbon development strategy and the accelerated exploitation of our hydrocarbons. But the fact of the matter remains that even with exponentially increasing levels of oil production, Guyana is a carbon sink and is expected to stay net zero for a long time to come. There are challenges, of course, when it comes to maintaining our forests in the face of climate change and unregulated and illegal mining activity, logging, clearing, and there is a clear need for international assistance in building institutional capacity for forest management and monitoring, even as the government should be putting some of the newfound windfall from oil and gas into forestry. And I believe that is part of the government's policy. Ambassador Fuller might have some perspectives on the whole issue of the figures being thrown about with regard to the carbon we have and the projections for continuing to be a carbon sink in the face of heightened the increased development of hydrocarbons. But at the moment, the government sees no contradiction in pursuing hydrocarbons development in consonance with maintaining a green posture and taking a very strong stand in the international arena on climate change. The fact of the matter remains that we are the victims of climate change in Guyana and in the Caribbean. None of this has been brought about by our own actions. And the view is that we should not be penalized because of this. We have every right to develop our resources in as sustainable a manner as possible.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Insanali. And Ambassador Fuller, if you have any comments on broadly on the situation of forest in Belize as well. We know there's a different reality than the one in the Antilles and also in Guyana and Suriname. So I wanted to ask you more about that, the situation.
Oh, certainly. Thank you. And I appreciate Ambassador Insanali's comments indeed. Obviously, Guyana is now rich on both sides, having great petroleum reserves, which they're exploiting to their benefit, but also huge forest reserves, which they also need to exploit properly. And so certainly, I think that's an area we need to look at. How do we use our forests in the Caribbean as a sink? And recognizing that I think we should be getting some payments from the international community as stewards of these forests, because if we can get that sort of payment upfront to preserving our forests, then we will certainly ensure our development continues to respect our forests, because it provides a global good for the international community. So I think we need to look at it from that point of view. Regarding the exploitation of offshore petroleum, I think Guyana went the right way. Belize took the opposite approach, because we depend on our marine resources for tourism, for fishing, for much more other things, and we recognize any exploitation of petroleum from the ocean for Belize could have been much more dangerous than what would be occurring for Guyana. So I think we are on the same page where that is concerned. One area I think we need to look at, and which affected Belize, was how climate change can impact your forest. Now, 20 years ago, in 1999, 2000, we had a huge pine bark beetle infestation, which destroyed 90% of our pine forests. Something like that, and which was really exacerbated by climate change, something like that could affect other types of forests. So I think that's an area we need to look at, and proper forest management is going to be extremely important in that regard. And so I think we need to look at that across the Caribbean also.
Thank you.
Ambassador Duddy, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I simply, I note that it's, Suriname, like Guyana, is nearly completely forested. In both countries, there are concerns about illicit activity in the interior, including, for instance, illicit gold mining. We know from as in fact a Duke colleague of mine has done quite a lot of work in documenting the environmental impacts of illicit mining, and the U.S. is working particularly with the government of Guyana to address that. But at the same time, it's important to recognize that these are very difficult issues. Gold, for instance, is very can enter the United States legally, but it's part of the problem is that how does one tell the difference between licitly produced and illicitly produced gold? It's very difficult. My own sense is that governments, plural, need to concentrate on the issue of issues of governance and also environmental impacts in dealing with problems ranging from illicit mining to the contraband in tropical hardwoods.
Mhm.
All very, very important and possibly more than any one country can deal with. A final comment. I agree entirely with Ambassador Insinali's remarks on Guyana's oil industry. It would be unreasonable to assume that a country which was really economically just limping along before the discovery of these reserves should forego the development of its oil sector. And in February, they produced more oil than Venezuela, by the way. At the same time, when we talk about, to respond to Ambassador Fuller's comment on international support for the good stewardship of these carbon sinks, this is something that Rafael Correa attempted some years ago in Ecuador, and that's a very big ask. Ergo, it is more important than ever that the countries of the Caribbean Basin develop their own resources when they can, and that includes energy.
Ale, I don't know, it might be useful to remind folks about the findings of our report, and then I'd like to go to Robert to see if he has anything he'd like to say, so we can wrap up. But this has been incredibly useful, and I really appreciate, again, you all spending the time with us in this discussion. But Ale.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. As we mentioned, next Tuesday we are going to publish the report on deforestation. The report analyzes the importance of the forest in the Caribbean, the different situation in Guyana, Suriname, the Caribbean islands, as well as Belize. And then we assess the threats, the challenges, including, as Ambassador Patrick was mentioning, illegal mining in Guyana and Suriname, also agriculture in Belize, the tourism industry in the Caribbean islands, and we formulate a series of policy recommendations that we are going to start promoting with our report. So yeah, that's on next Tuesday.
So stay tuned for our brilliant recommendations. Robert. Mute, you're on mute.
I was just, anyways. I want to acknowledge the questions. There is one question from the audience with respect to whether any of our reports will address mental health. And indeed, one of the coming reports is on vulnerable communities in the Caribbean, and it will, in all likelihood, in some way, address that issue. There's another question. I also want to acknowledge that we have in the audience Abe Lowenthal, who's a well-known expert on Latin America, and he wanted to have a comment. I don't know if Jackson, whether we can open it up to just let them have a quick comment. We're just wrapping up, so if Mr. Lowenthal can he? There he is.
Yes, you should be able to.
We're very honored to have you, Mr. Lowenthal.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Very good. First of all, congratulations on an excellent exchange of ideas. And it's to be commended that you're focusing sharply on this complex and very difficult situation in Haiti. And I think everything that was discussed is valuable. But my suggestion for being effective in this kind of work, sometimes you have a serious problem. The only way to address it successfully is to make it an even bigger problem. That is, to think about it in a broader context. So if you'll allow me just for a moment, I realize you're wrapping up. But some of you know my work and know that my career began by living in the Dominican Republic when the Marines in the 82nd Airborne Division landed. So I wrote a book about the Dominican intervention. At that time, years ago, decades ago, in fact, I got interested in the whole question of the United States' relations with the countries of the near abroad, that is, with the Caribbean Basin, Central America, and the northern tier of South America. It seems to me that U.S. relations with that region have never been thought through in a coherent and durable way in terms of policy. In 1968, the State Department under Dean Rusk commissioned a internal secret study on U.S. Caribbean relations. And the terms of reference of the group, which was chaired by Ambassador Milton Barral, was to look 25 years into the future and to sketch out the desirable state of U.S. relations with these countries that I'm defining. And then to, having done that, present suggestions for changes in policy now, that is 1968, that might increase the likelihood that the desirable state of relations might be closer 25 years into the future. In the preface to the report, the task force reported that at its first meeting, it said it decided that the 25 years into the future was much too long to be meaningfully addressed. And second, that the difficult cases of Cuba and Puerto Rico were politically fraught and therefore beyond the scope of the task force. So it redefined the task force to look at U.S. Caribbean relations 5 years into the future, minus Cuba and Puerto Rico. As you might expect, the report turned out to be very blasé. It really didn't say anything that had any significance. I asked Ambassador Barral what the budgetary implications would be if all the recommendations of the task force were adopted, and he answered candidly, very little. Now, that was a long time ago, but we have not really progressed. And there are people who say, as in this meeting it was pointed out, that to deal with some of the things that are going on in Haiti, and that have been going on for a long time, you have to look at root causes. And that's true of some of the discussions about Central America, Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and so on. It seems to me that people like you, who really understand these issues and have an organizational way of approaching them and so on, should join in trying to define a debate like this or a discussion like this on a really serious basis, looking at U.S. relations with the entire complex of countries and territories in our near abroad, in our proximate region, and to look at them thinking that it's evident that we really have not had successful policies in this region. We constantly get drawn in. We intervene in one way or another for an intense period to solve some immediate problem, back away. We don't address in a constructive way the long-term underlying developmental problems from a reliable and long-term basis. So I just want to make that comment because I feel like you are kindred spirits. It's another way of looking, and it's not contradictory. It's not either or, but it's a question of how you fit these things together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We're coming up to the top of the hour.
Let me wrap up here. I think we could have another hour to discuss this. And I don't want to get tied in and go too long here, but I do think, and Robert, I will go to you to wrap up. But the point that Mr. Lowenthal made, which is a key point, is something also that was voiced by my former boss, Senator Lugar, that would say that he would always talk about the region and say nobody's paying attention to the region or the Caribbean. He would say no guns. It would say no guns, no terrorists, no problem. And this was at the beginning of the 2000s when I think Ambassador Duddy was in the foreign services. It was after 9/11 especially, but I think that just highlights the point that Mr. Lowenthal made, which is there has to be a constant focus, and there cannot be these sporadic sort of inchings that we have had with the region only when there's a problem. We seem to deal with it. So that is loud and clear here. I think it's not just, for what we're seeing in the Caribbean. I think it's the region as a whole. Haiti has repeated itself for the last 2 decades, which has been the thick of my involvement. And I'm sure that the crises were happening before. And we seem to see that, and we need to have a more consistent approach to the region. Robert, I'm going to give you the task of closing up. But once again, thank you, ambassadors. This has been a very insightful hour.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you, Carl. I want to acknowledge also that we have, all of our projects, or many of our projects, function on the basis of high-level working groups that help us to put together these projects. And we have some members of our high-level working group in the public. We have Ivelaw Griffith and Scott McDonald and Camilla Idrovo and Alex Rosaria. So I want to thank them for joining us. I should say, I said Mr. Lowenthal. I should have said Dr. Lowenthal. I should know this by now. But anyways, I should have said Dr. Lowenthal.
Me too.
And special thanks to all 3 ambassadors. Special thanks to Alejandro, who's worked very hard and will continue to work very hard, because we have 3 more documents coming up. And so I just really want to thank the ambassadors again. I think everyone found this extremely, just one small observation, and then I'll shut up, which is the problems that we've talked about today in the Caribbean. It strikes me how they are basically the problems that are really top of mind all around the world, right? I mean, sort of crime, immigration, climate change, all these things are affecting everybody. The Caribbean perhaps is special because they're small islands, because of their proximity to the United States, but really the problems are fairly general. So just on that, I want to thank the public, and we'll see you when we publish our next paper.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.